Sveiki, aš Agnės Kamarakaitė, sveikinu Jūs
Good
nacionalinėme
afternoon. I am
žmogaus teisių
Agnes
forume.
Kamarakaite and
Na,
I
o ši
welcome you at the
mūsų
National Human
diskusija yra
Rights
ir
Forum.
apie įtraukųjį
This
švietimą.
debate is
Misija
related to
įmanoma ar
inclusive
neįmanoma, tą
education,
dabar ir
whether this
mėginsime
mission is possible
pasiaiškinti.
or not.
Ir aš
We
iš
will
karto
try to
pristatau
answer this question and
diskusijos
let me
dalyvius. Tai
introduce
Seimo
the
narys Justas
participants of
Džiugelis,
the
sveiki.
debate. Member of the Seimas Justas
Vytauto Didžiojo
Džiugelis,
universiteto socialinio darbo katedros profesorius, Jungtinių
professor
tautų
at Vytautas
neįgaliųjų teisių
Magnus
komiteto
University,
vicepirmininkas
Vice
profesorius
Chair
Jonas
of the
Truškus,
United
sveiki.
Nations Committee on the Rights of the Persons
Sutrikusio
with
intelekto globos
Disabilities,
bendrijos
Jonas
Viltis
Truškus,
projektų vykdytoja
a
Ramunė
project
Lebedytė
manager
Undžienė.
of the
Labadiena.
Disabled People
Vytauto
Association,
Didžiojo universiteto sociologijos katedros lektorė,
Lebedytė,
medicinos
and
antropologė,
lecturer
daktarė
of
Daiva
the Vytautas
Bartušienė,
Magnus
sveiki.
University Special
Ir
Pedagogic
taip pat Klaipėdos rajono
teacher Svaja
Dovilų
Venskienė,
pagrindinės mokyklos
as
specialioji
well
pedagogė,
as
metodininkė Svaja Venskienė.
Daiva
Sveiki.
Bartuškienė,
Ir ši
lecturer of
diskusija
the
yra
Sociology
verčiama į
Department and
anglų ir
Vytautas
lietuvių
Department,
gestų kalbas.
Vytautas Magnus
Ir taip pat
University.
jinai
The
įrašinėjama,
debate
po to
will be
įrašas atsidurs
interpreted into
internete,
the
tai tikrai
English
galėsite
and
bet kada
Lithuanian
jį ir
languages.
pasižiūrėti.
So
O tie, kurie mūsų
later
klauso,
on,
žiūri,
the
dalyvauja, tai tikiuosi,
debate
kad
will be,
klausimus
the
mūsų
recording
dalyviams
of the
užduosite.
debate will be
Tą galite
included
padaryti, parašę,
in
prisijungę
the
prie transliacijos
website of
puslapio
our
dešinėje
forum.
ekrano pusėje.
So you can also
Skiltyje klausimus ir
participate in the
komentarus
debate
rašykite
by
čia.
posting
Ir
your
dar
questions
vienas
on the very
dalykas,
same
netrukus
website of
turėtumėm
the
teletiltu
forum.
jungti su
Soon
Gargždų
we will
Lankučio
also
viešąja
have
biblioteka.
the
Ten jaunimas mūsų klauso, ne tik matau jaunimas, įvairaus
young
amžiaus žmonių
people
yra ir turėtumėm net
by
ir pradėti mūsų
a
diskusiją
video link.
nuo jų klausimo. Kokį
And
toną jie mums šitai
I
diskusijai
believe that we will
užduos.
have to start from the young people.
Na, regis, gal klausimų
It
bus
seems
vėliau, tai
that
tikrai
we will have
prisijunkite ir
questions
užduokit,
from
reaguokit
the
į
young
tai, ką
people
mes
later on, so we will
kalbam.
kindly
O mes
ask
tada
you
pradėkim
to
nuo to
be
politinio
active,
sprendimo.
and we
Prie
will
šito
begin with a
įtraukaus
political
švietimo
decision
politinio sprendimo buvo
on
einama ilgai, ne
inclusive
vienerius metus
education.
ir galų
It
gale
took
jis
many
buvo
years
priimtas.
to adopt the
Pone
decision on
Džiugeli, kaip
inclusive
ir kodėl?
education. Mr. Džiugelis, could you tell us a bit more about the situation? Well, I'm very happy that we have managed to adopt the decision, because for 25 or 28 years, children with special needs were discriminated, and schools had the right to choose whether they want to enroll children with special needs to school or not. And I'm very happy that we have managed to adopt the law on inclusive education. To tell the truth, I had to talk with many political institutions, beginning with the Lithuanian parliament, which initiated the law. I also talked to the president's office, and I'm very happy that this political decision was adopted. Moreover, this decision has been included in the national agenda of education. We included inclusive education irrespective of the political party to come to the Lithuanian parliament. So we have 2 more years to prepare for the processes in a quality way, to prepare for the changes systematically, because we have to prepare not only the specialists, but also address the question of infrastructure. We have gained some funding from the EU funds. We also have to prepare our mindset for inclusive education, because to my mind, the school depends on the approach to the people with disabilities. Mr. Ruškus, are we ready for inclusive education? Well, it's difficult to say whether we are ready. But we can no longer exclude children with disabilities to our schools and to enroll them into special schools with very low expectations. So it seems that we already have the system that is prone to discriminate people with disabilities. As we now have the law on inclusive education, we do hope that the system will change. But in order to change the system, we need the law, because without the law, without the legal foundation, foundation, there will be no changes. But again, we will have to look at how schools have been provided with the necessary teachers, because we do need quality teachers, and quality is the right of every child. The state is obligated to provide quality education environment because it will determine the future of the child. That is why we are talking about this question, because the rights of the child are the rights, human rights. Yes, every child has the right to quality education. Previously, children were discriminated on the basis of disability because they were enrolled in special schools and prevented them from a better life in society further on. Madam Venskiene, you say that it is not right that we have to put the emphasis on schools because there is a lack of leaders and initiatives from society to lead us this way. Who do you think these leaders should be and have to be? Inclusive education, in fact, is a process and the path that not everyone will choose to take. We still have rather ardent debates among parents and among parents who have children with disabilities and people who have healthy children. In order to ensure that inclusive education is in place, we need to ensure that there is political will, that there is a breakthrough, and that there is because we are still talking rather than doing. Once we have doers, we will have the changes in place. Well, it seems that we do have the political will. The ministries have also drafted their own plans. So who else should be contributing? Well, these changes are taking place at a very slow pace, indeed. And there is no breakthrough that we needed. I can't understand why it took so long for Lithuania to adopt the law. We have been living with children with disabilities for many years now, and it seems that every class in school has at least 2, 3, or 4 children with disabilities. I do agree that this is a challenge both for children and for teachers, but we hope that schools will not become a battlefield, but a place for children to be educated. Before It seems that the education system is the only system that needed so many years to introduce the changes. We had various concepts with regard to schools, but it seems that we have never accomplished the objective so far. We now have a new concept of inclusive education, but it seems that we all have to decide what we want to achieve. Madam Lebedytė-Udzienė, what do you think? Are we still lagging behind? Well, yes, we are taking very slow steps. But as a representative of families who have children with intellectual disabilities, with complex disabilities, with Down syndromes, or with autism spectrum, every child is unique in his own way. If we take them to school, if we push them into the environment, everyone will face negative consequences because the teachers are not ready for that. Parents whose children are going to attend the same classes do not have the courage because they think that they will be attacked by other parents because parents of healthy children are afraid that their own children will lack the attention from the teacher. We also lack competences, infrastructure, and many other things. We have to make changes in a complex way because the child will have to be taken to school. He will have to be taken to school. He will have to change his clothes before physical training classes. So we should not be assigning this task to teachers or school principals. we first and foremost have to educate our society. Is there a threat that there will be a formal process of transferring children from special schools to general schools? Yes, there are some fears, and this will not be good neither for children with special needs nor for the rest of the class. I believe that we should start developing the approach that we need from early years, from kindergartens. If children and teachers knew what children with what disabilities they're going to have in the classes, the process would become much longer. They have to know whether they will have a child with a hearing disability or those who are unable to move. If they knew all the information beforehand, they would not be that afraid, because teachers and principals should not find out about the children with disabilities in their classes on the 1st of September, that is on the first day of the school year. We have to provide access to education to each and every child. We have to ensure that teachers cooperate with the specialists from special schools. Well, we had to start doing this long before. But I hope I don't expect this to happen very smoothly by the year 2024, because we still need a new generation to come. We need to have the generation that has grown from the kindergarten together with children with disabilities. If this is the case, then they will not be afraid to accept others. We have to start from the very low step. We have to ensure that there is a system in place, because if there is no system, children will not feel comfortable. We don't need this to be a battlefield, but rather a comfortable environment for everyone. Madam Bartušienė, you have looked into this battlefield. You talk to parents of children with disabilities and of parents with healthy children, because they all want the individual needs of their children to be reflected. When I talk to families with autistic children, I see that there is a battlefield already. Many families have already experienced some negative consequences to some extent. When it comes to inclusive education, I believe that this issue is much broader, because we have to answer what kind of society we want to have and what kind of society we want to live in. If we want inclusive society, if we want to include every child and not to leave the child behind the margins, we have to ensure that there is inclusive education. I do agree that we have to start raising awareness from early years, from kindergartens. The first steps have already been taken. Coming back to your question about autistic children and families with autistic children and their experiences, yes, I do agree that there are many fears, and these families talk about those fears in public. Well, but it should also be mentioned that parents on both sides of the barricades have their own fears, and those fears move us from each other even further apart. It would be much easier if we could get together and talk about the problems, because people with healthy children are afraid of different children, children with disabilities. Teachers are afraid of parents who both have healthy children and children with disabilities. We are influenced by fears, and those fears do not promote a sense of solidarity. Then what should be done? Is there any hope for the future? I think that the only way forward is the debate with the interested parties. We should try to find
sąlyčio taškų.
common
Iš
ground.
tiesų šitoje situacijoje aš
When it
manyčiau,
comes
kad
to this situation,
palaikymo,
I
supratimo
think
reikia ir
that
mokytojams, nes mes
both
kalbam apie
teachers
tai, kad mokytojų
and
laukia
parents
labai
need
didelis
support, because
krūvis.
we all
Jų
agree
laukia
that
naujos
teachers will have
kompetencijos,
to
kurios
bear the
taip pat turi
burden.
būti kažkokiu
They will
būdu
have to learn
įgyjamos
new
darbui su tais
competencies. They will
vaikais.
have to acquire new
Labai didelio
competencies to
palaikymo
work
reikia
with
tėvams,
children
kurie
with
turi,
disabilities. We also
jau
need to
dabar
ensure
turi
that
neigiamų patirčių
parents
ir kurie bijo,
also
pavyzdžiui, tokių
receive
dalykų,
the
kad, na,
necessary
vaikai
support.
bus iš anksto
For
nurašomi,
example,
išankstinių nuostatų
there are
įvairiausių
some
turėjimas.
prejudices.
Kitas dalykas,
People
na,
believe
visa tai, ką mes
that
darėme praktiškai visą 20-ąjį amžių,
children
tai
with
yra,
disabilities
na,
will be
medikalizavome ir
disregarded.
patologizavome
But
visus
it seems that we have
skirtingumus,
pathologized all the differences. We have made it more difficult for people with disabilities to communicate and to learn.
Tai dabar visus šitos dalykus mes bandome
It seems that now we have to rectify the situation,
bent jau taip, kaip mes įsivaizduojame, kokia turėtų būti,
at least to the extent that we imagine is proper and good for more inclusive educational environment, which means that we need solidarity from all the stakeholders. Therefore, what we need is the debate. I'd like to remind you that everyone who is watching us online can post their questions on the website of the forum. There's a special section on the right corner of the screen. You can comment on the ideas that are expressed during debate. And I'd like to remind you that we have the community from the Gargždai town participating in the forum online.
Jūs gal galit savo švietimo patirtim pasidalinti? Kaip jūs mokėtės?
Mr. Džiugelis, could you share your education experience? My education experience was rather negative because I had to study at home and I was always neglected. So I do understand what parents with children with disabilities feel and what they have to face, because those children are rejected both by society and by the school. I'd like to draw your attention to one thing. I heard concerns by teachers and by the broader society who raise children without special needs. But I believe that everyone has special needs. No one ever said that children with special needs will automatically be crammed into general education schools. We are talking about the right of families, about the right of children and parents to choose which school they want to be enrolled in, whether it will be a special school or a school of general education. A second important thing is that inclusive education is not only the responsibility of the Ministry of Education and Science. It is the responsibility of the Ministry of Social Security and Labor, which means that we need some special needs, means and measures how to integrate those children. We have not adopted the law on the personal assistant for a child with special needs. Still, families have the assistant, the personal assistant, in order to ensure that their children with special needs could attend general secondary schools. So no one intends to impose on teachers children with special needs. We also have to plan forward, and we have to think as to how we should call those teachers who work with children with disabilities. We have to help teachers in all the education process, having in mind that our classes contain approximately 30 school children in one class. And to conclude, when it comes to leadership, I always say that the job of politicians is not only to adopt laws, but also to travel across regions, to visit schools, and to educate our society and various communities about the need for changes. It is also important for the schools themselves not to be stuck in fear. Well, we do we have adopted the law. The law will enter into force, but the schools have to show their initiative and to look for best solutions and to ask if they have some questions, the questions that have not been answered. They can give questions to me or the Ministry of Education and Science. We now have the Minister Counselor who is in charge of inclusive education, which means that we can focus highest political attention to inclusive education. So we should not be focusing on on implementing the objectives, but on the way we implement the objectives. We have to hold open debate with all social groups. Any reform, any good job is doomed to fail because of fears. Therefore, we have to leave the fears aside. Mr. Ruškus? Well, you have talked about fears, but we should not be thinking about fear as a determination of the situation. Well, member of the Seimas expressed his appreciation of the adopted law and of the breakthrough. Still, we have to remain very cautious because there are still many hurdles that are ahead of us and that might bring us back a few steps backwards. There are a few hurdles, I will mention two of them, that will... One hurdle is the right for the parents to choose between the special education and general education, because it is not the right of the person to choose segregated education and to be educated either within the society or outside the society. Every child has the right to be educated equally within the society. So in this place, there might be some interpretations, and some already say that the law provides for the possibility for parents to choose. It has been said that inclusive education is not the choice. It is the right of every human being. Another hurdle that I would like to talk about is the special classes. Special classes have nothing to do with inclusive education, and the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities has clearly said that special classes is not the choice. I do understand that special classes could be seen as some intermediary, as some transition period classes, but they should not remain in the future. We should look at those special classes very cautiously in order to ensure that special classes do not remain as a norm further on. This should not become a norm. We have to ensure that there is a mechanism to prevent this. Well, as the first hurdle is concerned, does that mean that there should be no special schools at all? There should be neither special schools nor special classes in the future. I should not be considered as a radical person, but I believe that education is a social right, and this concept is progressive, follows the principle of progressive realization. We have to take the steps forward, having in mind a clear objective of inclusive education, because it might, in the future, it might happen that special classes will remain forever in our classes, but this should not be the case. This is not the transitional stop, because sometimes those transitional classes become a norm. It is difficult to say, but, well, yes, there could be some flexible forms, but the objective in itself is full inclusive education where children are educated in one and the same space and they receive the support and assistance from the teachers. And the state has to ensure this assistance both to children, to schools, and to children. Daiva Bartušienė, the floor is yours. I have a very brief comment to respond to the ideas expressed by my colleague and the vision by my colleague. Let me say that we have to talk about the idea of inclusive education as the changes not within this very same framework, but to see inclusive education as the possibility to make changes in the entire education system. The way the inclusive education should look like is far from being compatible with what is currently present in our schools. Sociologists and anthropological scientists say that this is a type of violence against children. Overcrowded classes is yet another problem because children, they have to stay in one and the same class with one adult who does not have any physical possibilities to ensure their safety and security and the most essential needs. So we have to see a much wider vision and to see the changes from a wider perspective rather than just organizing the transfer of children to schools. Mr. Džiugelis, I'd like to respond to this. I think that the duty of the state is to ensure inclusive education so that every school is able to accept children with different disabilities. When we talk about the choice, as I have said, we still have to ensure the possibilities for this part of the society, let's say the society of the disabled, because the people with visual impairment want to attend special education schools. So it's okay because we do not intend and we do not force them to go to schools of general education, because in order to be able to teach people with visual impairment, we have to ensure that there is special methodology. If children with disability, visual disability, decide that they are not willing to study in a secondary school of general education, we have to respect that choice. Because Vilnius is quite a huge city, and everyone has the right to choose the facility which is more comfortable and more convenient for them. But every school from the year 2024 should be ready to accept children with various disabilities. I know this is a very dynamic process, but in fact, the very inclusive education is a very dynamic process, which means that we have to ensure that schools are ready to accept such children. We have to show the door and all the possibilities for the families with children with disabilities. We have to help schools, to help teachers to accept those children. Madam Venskiene. Well, I still have one remark. I'll speak from the perspective of universities. One rector at the university says that we will be building a department for the disabilities outside this building, and they will be able to study. I don't know whether constructing a new building for the people with disabilities and providing the building with the most modern infrastructure is the solution. Failure to talk about the system is already disappointing. It seems that everyone has turned around to schools, and it seems that everyone in school is waiting until until they are destroyed. But our children are not born being 6 years old. We have to, as I have mentioned, everything has to start from the very early stages when children are born, they are taken to various doctors, they are taken to various specialists. We have to ensure that all the system is in the place. What will happen when the child reaches 16 years of age? Shall we send those children to cut flowers, to mow the meadow? But maybe those children do not want to mow the meadow. Maybe they want to construct planes. Now children do not see the perspective. We only have the idea, but it seems that we already have enthusiasm, but we don't have the measures. Are you expecting this from the Ministry of Education or some other ministry? I'm not expecting this from the Ministry of Education. I think that there is no system ensured. I don't want to be supporting and maintaining an army of people with disabilities. They should be working. My grandson, who is autistic, is studying currently in Italy, and I am thankful to God that he's not studying and he's not living in Lithuania, because we have the mindset that has been formed from the very early days of the kindergarten.
Ms. Lebedytė Undzėnienė, why a part of parents do not want to send their children to general schools? Justas Galis and Mr. Ruškus spoke about the possibility, but the reasons are very important here. Why? Well, it all depends on fears. We are afraid of things we do not know. The society lacks information, education about different disabilities. Or we lack social media campaigns, voluntary activities. We lack a general attitude to society as a whole, composed of different people with disabilities, with addictions. Parents are afraid. Some parents are afraid of getting too little attention for their child. Parents of children with disabilities are afraid that their children would be left alone, that they would be placed at school but will not receive any help to learn. Even if we have wonderfully equipped room for rest, this disabled child might spend the whole day in this room. Teachers lack competencies as well. Parents lack knowledge. It is quite normal. We need to have education. Teachers have to know that they are teaching a child to read so that this child could then be able to read. All the sides need to know that they are progressing into some kind of future. Education is not only about coloring books. We need to have education. Education through best practices, best examples. So we can complain about many things, but we need to educate people, we need to learn from best examples, and we need to promote those good examples. This is not only a part of the education system. If children are in schools, and if a child needs to be fed, and we do not have medical offices in our schools, so the healthcare is not involved in our education system. Health system, social system. Inclusive education is not only about the lessons. What about a child when he finishes school at 12 p.m.? after-school activities. If they are not insured, parents are out of employment. Mothers going to assist their children in learning is not a way out. And sometimes, actually, there is idea that mothers of disabled children should be sent as assistants for teachers. I want to contribute. When I communicate with parents of children, autistic children, I hear that all parents are afraid of the same things, and these fears, well, certainly we have some specific things such as regress when a child feels a certain stress, and this might be an impediment to child's development or child's progress, and a leap backwards could occur for autistic children. Medicalization, for example, which is coming from lack of knowledge when teachers do not know that some children may function more easily, for example, running around while instead of sitting on the chair. Very often there are attempts to medicalize children, but I want to stress that very often parents' fears and concerns
Tai iš principo yra daug platesnių visuomeniai vykstančių dalykų kontekste.
Are the reflection of wider phenomena in society. These are not only fears and things that occur in a certain type of community.
Apie tai mes kalbam.
But we address these issues with all parents. Mr. Džiugelis, can it happen that in 2024 nothing ever happens? We have the choice, and very often this choice is in favor of specialized schools out of fear, so nothing might happen in 2024. Well, first of all, what breakthrough should we have in 2024? It's just a formality, the implementation of the law, but this formality is very important in protecting parents' rights. In 2016, a group of people with disabilities applied to court because their rights were not ensured during the elections, and they won the court case. And this law would be a must for schools, so that the schools are no longer able to say that we do not want such children. I want to stress, we should not wait for some additional services. Lithuania has a lot of social services, but they need to be taken and used. Personal assistant exists. Every family who has a child with disabilities can apply for the personal assistant. This is a state-trained nanny for a child. For example, in a case of feeding a child, a nanny that would be able to do that at school. This is an additional jobs in the regions, and this is equally important. 11 euro per hour for an assistant is a very good money. But we are facing another problem in Lithuania. It is the immigration problem. We lack people willing to work. willing to take those jobs. We need to think of who will be working as assistants, who will be providing social services. But this is outside the scope of today's discussion. We should not wait for 2024. Each school, while planning their budgets, should plan the priorities and
Gali ar tą daro?
are they able to do that, or do they do that? I cannot say anything about the municipalities, but I know many examples when schools accept children with special needs. And this is prestigious for a school. Is it about good educational results? Maybe serving all the needs of all the children is prestigious. I would take my child to a school which teaches you to be a good person, able to live in a society and respecting other people in society. This would be the choice of school for my child.
Ponia Venckiene, jūsų mokykla yra tokia mokykla.
Ms. Venckiene, your school is such school. You have 16 autistic children.
Kaip apie gerą pavyzdį, o ne
So this is
tendenciją.
a good example, I guess, not only a tendency.
Čia pokalbį įsijungti apie asmeninius asistentus.
Well, speaking about personal assistants,
Labai norėtų asmeninis asistentas dirbti su tokiu vaiku, kai jo mama, pavyzdžiui, nori iš tikrųjų pamiegoti kitam kambarį.
for example,
Šitas autistiškas vaikas
is it possible for a personal assistant to work with a child who vomits, who spits, and a mother just wants to sleep in another room? Will we find such people willing to work and to do this job? Probably. And our school is not extraordinary, but we have a bigger concentration of autistic children. Our experience is very rich. We're not ready for inclusive education. Based on your experience, no, we're not ready. Based on our experience, we are not ready, because next month we will get another pupil and the inclusion will be different. The inclusion of that specific child will be different. We have some basic things, but we lack cooperation with children rather than aggressive critics from parents. We want to start discussion. We don't need special trainings for teaching children to color books. We need normal education, and this is costly. We need a telephone number for asking advice. We do not need any monitoring, but we need help and assistance. We wish to get assistance by calling us and saying, well, we know that you have children, autistic children, can we help you? But no, we get calls saying that we're going to check on you. For example, would any other professions agree to be checked or monitored by certain monitoring institutions? We're facing many problems that we are trying to address, but support would be needed for us. But support is needed for parents of those children with mental disabilities as well.
nes tikrina tai popierius, o ne...
Actually, all our documentation is correct. We do, but we have to think about
Taip, aš labai
about
trumpai tik tai
children.
noriu sureaguoti į tai, ko
My
reikia,
brief
ar ne, ir kad
comment.
turėti tų skambučių kažkam paskambinti.
The calls
Bet
that
aš tai
we
matyčiau
need
labai
and
didelį
needs
vaidmenį
that
iš
we
tiesų
have.
suaugusių
I
autistiškų žmonių
see
ir jų
the role
patarimus, jų
of
patirtis ir juos
autistic
įtraukti į tai,
grown-ups.
ką
Their
jau jie yra
experience
patyrę
would
ir
be
dabar
very
jau
useful
retrospektyviai
because
gali vertinti.
they can
Tai tikrai
evaluate
matyčiau, nes
their
man
own
atrodo,
life,
kad
their
ten
own
yra
experience,
didelis
and
lobynas
help us.
ir patarimų
This is a
ir
huge
visų
source
kitų gerų
of
dalykų.
help and
Pone
advice.
Ruško, apie tai iš ko ir kaip
Mr. Ruškos,
reikėtų mokytis, kaip daryti tą
How
įtraukimą.
should we learn how to make this inclusive education? Well, we have a lot of sources.
Prieš tai labai stipriai palėtė. Ta, ką minėjau, yra socialinė teisė yra progresyviai realizuojama.
Social right is progressively realized.
Justas, man rodo, minėjo, kad
Justas said
negali, tikrai
that
tai nėra kelias, kad paimti ir mechaniškai perkelti.
we cannot only mechanically transpose people or children from one school to another. But
įtraukusis ugdymas, jį reikia matyti kaip nuolatinį
inclusive
procesą.
education should be seen
Blogiausia
as a
nieko
constant
nevyksta, kai
process.
mokyklos užsidaro.
Doing nothing is the worst thing when schools close
Arba tiesiog
for
nieko
such
nevyksta
children,
pačioje
or
mokykloje
nothing
ir
happens
yra
inside
nuolatinis
a school.
mokymasis, šitas terminas, jis labai ypatingai galioja.
Lifelong learning
Realiai
is
nėra-
an
niekada
important
nebus tas
concept
taškas,
in
kai
this
pasakysi,
area.
štai, viskas,
And we will
štai,
never
štai,
achieve the stage when we can say that, well, everything has been done.
mokyklą nuvažiuosim, pažiūrėsim, mes padarysim taip, kaip
And very often I'm asked to give a school in a foreign country an exemplary school, but I cannot give one example.
čia dabar kalba apie
Children with disabilities are very, very different. We do not have only the autistic disorders, we have different disabilities, different mental disabilities.
poreikį.
Therefore, we have the need for educational assistance, educational environments, and these needs are different. This is a process,
Mokyklų mokymasis vienas iš kitų.
and schools need to learn from each other. Schools need to learn understanding.
Išvis nėra pasaulyje nei vieno žmogaus, kuris atvažiuos, viską paaiškins.
We don't have people in the world who could come and teach you how to do things.
Bet kas yra labai svarbu?
But what matters, what really matters, thank you, Justas, for your mentioning that an inclusive school should become prestigious, and that the concept of prestigious school should change, that a prestigious school is not the best performing school, but the school that ensures diversity, ensures inclusion. So what really matters here is to understand the standard of human rights. When schools aims at inclusive education and the culture of human rights, unless we have this understanding, we are not able to progress anymore. Mr. Džiugelis, discussions are very good, but we should not forget the communities of schools. This is very important. It is important to accept different children. Sometimes there are concerns that somebody from an institution doesn't come to a school to teach us. Nobody can teach a school. Every school can take a certain leadership in the regions. Why can't schools cooperate with NGOs? Why can't schools in the regions have a disabled person as a mentor who would change the attitude of teachers and of the entire community, especially those who are skeptics, for example, skeptical parents? On our national programs, we should target inclusion. Personal examples are best to change the attitude. Don't we have a person with disabilities in different regions in Lithuania? We do have such children, people. Such people should be invited to explain their experience in one or another school to the council of the school or school community. And this is the initial step for change. And we should not wait for 2024. Changes could have been implemented earlier, but it's a position of every school, whether we work from 8 to 5 and close our doors and hope that special needs will not be satisfied in our schools, or we take certain steps that depend on us to make such children be visible. The strength of society lies in diversity. If we want to be a strong society, we need to do
Aš tik tai
something.
priminsiu klausytojams ir
I will
žiūrovams, kad jūs
remind
galit
the
prisijungti prie šitos
audience that
diskusijos
you can
ir
join our
užduoti
discussion and
klausimus.
ask
Ta
questions.
galite padaryti.
You can do this
Prisijungę prie transliacijos puslapio dešinėje ekrano pusėje.
on the
skiltyje
right
klausimus
side
ir
of
komentarus
the
rašykit čia. Vieną
broadcasting
klausimą gavome, aš netrukus
page.
jį paskaitysiu,
I have
bet ponas
one
Ruškus dar norėjo
question.
sureaguoti.
Mr. Ruškus wanted to react briefly. We need to learn from each other. We need to learn from best practices from different schools. I want to mention the example of Iceland. The country has the policy of inclusive education and has financial mechanisms. And schools that clearly choose inclusive education get strong funding from the state, then they are evaluated a year later in order to see the process. And I'm actually looking forward to the day when schools are awarded. I mean, the schools that implement inclusive education.
Reitinguose galbūt irgi ne tik tos mokyklos,
And the
kurios
schools are rated not only according
paruošia,
to their performance, but according to their inclusion. We need to understand that schools that ensure diversity are mostly isolated from the education system. We need to think about the concrete support.
Aida nori paklausti, taip
Aida
Venckienė,
wants
gal
to
jums
ask
šitas
a
klausimas.
question to
Kaip
Ms.
būtų
Venckienė.
geriausia pasirengti
How
mokytojams
to-
dirbti su klasėmis, kuriuose
how
mokytojus ir
to
specialių
better
poreikių vaikai?
prepare
Kursai, mokymai,
for
trumposios metų trukmės
for
studijos aukštosiose
teachers
mokyklose.
willing to receive children with special needs. I think that we should have quality training. We have many seminars and trainings, but quality education is sometimes very brief. But it is very useful to you, and you know that 20 strategies, for example, can be used out of 25 that are given. In Vilnius, quality free of charge help can be given, and teachers
galbūt yra mokyklose, ne galbūt, bet iš tikrųjų yra specialistai, kurie turėtų padėti.
should be helped by specialists. Teachers are very often lost in their doubts, and therefore they need certain mentors.
Ponia Lebedytė Undzienė, dar irgi tos asmeninės
Ms.
patirties norisi.
Undzienė,
Jūs irgi
your
savo
personal
vaiką
experience,
vedate į bendro lavinimo
you
mokyklą,
take your
ar ne? Kokia
child
yra
to a
jūsų
general
patirtis? Galite
education
pasidalyti?
school. What is your experience here? My child's experience is that I cannot call it an inclusive education because he studies in a general education school, but in
Jums
special
pasirodė vis tiek
class.
geresnis
But it
variantas
is
ta
a
specialioji
better
klasė negu
version
specialioji
than
mokykla.
a special school. Well, yes, it's a better option. Since my son has a Down syndrome, and these children copy the environment. They need good experience, best practice. They need the environment where they can learn from. And I cannot say that my child is involved in inclusive education. Certainly, pandemic contributed to that. And he doesn't see any other children. Before the pandemic, he used to go in for sports, to the choir rehearsal with other children, and was engaged in other extracurricular activities with other children. But now he is not. So out of 600 children in our school, 90 are children with special needs.
Nors tai 2024 metais keisti, vėlgi tas pats klausimas apie tai, ar tos specialiosios klasės išnyks.
Will the special classes disappear after 2024? Well, the plans of our school is to ensure to ensure inclusive education and no special classes. But we have examples, so when children with Down syndrome, for example, or other intellectual disabilities are included in general education and mainstream education. So this was the school that has long ago decided to include children with the disabilities and different needs. And I hope that this school will progress further. Mr. Ruškus. I mentioned two pitfalls that we might encounter. We need to know them. The third pitfall: some schools in Lithuania want to do that, and they accept children with disabilities. And inclusive schools and education should not become new type special schools, because this will discredit inclusive schools. Inclusive education means that all schools have to be inclusive, not certain schools that choose to be inclusive, and some schools saying that, well, no, we only accept gifted children. Inclusive education should be seen not as a privilege of certain schools, but as a privilege of all schools. Ms. Lenskiene, you said that your school does this. Your school is very popular among parents with the children with disabilities, and then the school has a certain concept. Well, we have many children coming from different areas. We had a special child from Klaipėda. This was the only case, but he lives and he studies independendently. But these are mostly local children that come to our school. In Gargždai, we have a lot of autistic children, children with Down syndrome. We are not a special school in this respect. Mr. Čiugelis, everything depends on municipalities. Some municipalities are more successful, others are less successful. From the perspective of the central government, what should we do to even out this process? Well, yes, this is not Lithuania's case. In Norway, we have the same situation when life quality differs from municipality to municipality. Every municipality should try to do its best. And we, as representatives of the national government, can do is go and speak to the administration of every municipality with the schools about the priorities. And I'm actually doing this. I've been doing this for 6 years. I discuss different topics. Personally, I want to focus on visiting schools and achieving better results in inclusive education. But we need to be heard. Speaking is not enough. We need to have a joint interest. The society has to understand that the basis of a strong state is to have all and to see its all children. So this has been my vision, and I will continue doing this. Concerning different details, I'm not an educational expert, but in terms of the system and the operation of the system, either we improve the system, we still have time, and it is important that every community knows how this system works. We need not to focus only on education and inclusive education. We need to think about the social area. It is closely related to inclusive education. And we see changes. And I work in the Committee on Social Affairs and Labor in the Parliament. Now, including all the children in education and the process of training and preparation, infrastructural moments,
Ar visas tas vertybinis
or the
dalykas ir
value-based
ruošimo klausimas, kuris, aišku, kur kas sudėtingesnis ir
preparation is more important.
Man
Which
atrodo, kad abu
of them
atsakymai
is
teisingi
important?
ir
I guess
abiejų
that
dalykų
both
reikia. Čia turėtų būti kažkokia
answers
šitų
are
dalykų
correct.
sinergija, bet
We need a synergy of those two
labiausiai gal
things.
norėčiau akcentuoti tai,
But I want
kad
to stress
požiūrio keitimas
that
vis tik
changing
pas
an
mus
attitude
dažniausiai eina
in our
kažkur
country
rikiuotės uodegoj.
is
Ir
not a
iš ko aš
priority.
pastebiu tai, kad
And I
pavyzdžiui,
notice,
Arneva kolegė minėjo
my colleague
mokytojų
mentioned
seminarai,
that
įvairios kažkokios
teachers
mokymo programos.
have
Ką
different
aš
training
pastebiu,
seminars.
kai juose dalyvauju, iš tiesų į jas ateina tie, kurie ir taip jau turi
And
žinių,
those seminars
arba
are
turi
attended by
klasėse
the
mokinių,
teachers that
arba
already
domisi
have
šitą
knowledge
sritimi.
or have
Ir tas procentas, kuriems
pupils
labiausiai
with
reikia šitų
special
dalykų,
needs.
yra
But people who
kažkur.
really need
Tai
this knowledge
labai reikia
do not
pasiekti
attend those
kažkokiu
seminars.
būdu surasti
Therefore, these
kelią į
people
tuos
need
žmonės,
to be
kuriems reikia.
targeted.
Ir
They need
kartais
to
tos
be found.
diskusijos susitikus su
And
mokytoju
sometimes
vyksta, graži
discussions when
patirtis
we
pasidalinama,
meet
bet iš esmės ta sklaida,
with
plėtra,
teachers,
jinai idėjos neįvyksta.
but we do not have the spread,
tiesiog
further
grupės.
spread of the
Kitas
idea.
dalykas yra labai dažnai
And very often,
mokytojai klausia, ypatingai va
teachers
tokių seminarų metu,
ask
tai kaip
during
mums dabar
seminars,
reikės mokyti tuos
how should
skirtingus
we
vaikus,
teach
matematikos, fizikos ir visų
different
kitų
children
dalykų.
mathematics
Tai
and many
šitoje
other
vietoje
subjects?
labai dažnai
And in this
norisi
case,
užduoti
very
klausimą
often,
tiesiog
I want
kontru,
to
o
ask
kaip jūs tą dabar darote,
another
nes man
question.
atrodo,
And
manimas ir galvojimas, kad
how are you
dabar visi
teaching your
vaikai vienodai
children
geba
now? Because
ir
not all the
vienodai
children are
juos galima
equally
mokyti, tai
able
yra
to
pati
learn
didžiausia,
and study.
nežinau, visiškai blistinės kultūros, aš sakyčiau, apraiška.
Ir apskritai akcentas į
Well,
tai,
the
ko
focus
nemoka vaikas.
on the
ar ne?
fact
Šitas irgi labai
of
svarbus
children
dalykas.
not knowing
Taip, nes
something.
visa mūsų, na, sakykime, ta
Yes, because,
masinio ugdymo idėja ir buvo
The idea
paremta
of
tuo,
mass
kad, na,
education was based on the
tokiu
idea
demokratišku
that
ir tokiu subtiliu būdu
democratic and
atrišuotume tai,
subtle
kurie
ways
geba
should be used
kažką
to differentiate
potencialiai ir
between the
nepotencialiai ir tie, kurie
children
ne.
that
Na ir dabar mes
have
turime tiesiog
potential
rezultatą tame, kad vis tik pamatėm,
skills.
kad šitas
And now
būdas
we see
nebuvo
that
pats
this
geriausias.
choice,
Ir
this option was
apie
not
tai,
the
ką mes
best.
dabar kalbame, ar ne, tai
And,
irgi
our
nereikia manyti,
today's
kad, na, tai yra
discussion
išsigelbėjimas ir kad
is
tai yra
not the
iš
way
tiesų
out.
šiuo metu tai yra taip, ta idėja, kurią mes
Yes,
turėtume,
this is the
na,
idea that
siekti jos
needs
visi
to be
bendrai,
followed
bet kiek jinai ir
jointly.
kaip ji palies mus visus, mes
But how
pamatysim,
this
na,
is
tikrai
going
labai
to
negreitai.
affect us,
Aišku,
we will
užsienio
see it
patirtis
in a
rodo,
longer
kad
term.
yra labai
Experience of
gražių
foreign countries
pavyzdžių,
shows
bet
that we
nepamirškime
might
ir to,
have
kad
very
kiekviena
beautiful
visuomenė eina
examples,
savo raidos
but
keliu,
every
kiekviena
society
visuomenė
follows
turi
its own
savo,
path of
na,
development, and
tam
every
tikrą
society
socialinį ir
has its
kultūrinį
own
kontekstą
socio-cultural
ir ne
context.
visada tas dairimasis
And,
į
this,
kaimyną turi iš tiesų, na,
Attempts to learn from
pagrindą.
foreign
Dar
countries
liko mūsų diskusijai
is not
10
always
minučių, tai
useful.
paskutinis-
We still have
paskutinė galimybė
10
užduoti jums
minutes.
rūpimą
This is
klausimą, kelis
the last
klausimus mes jau
chance
turim, bet
to
ponia
ask
Venckienė
questions.
irgi norėjo dar reaguoti.
Ms. Linskenė wanted to react.
Matyti matyti savo mokinius.
I want to see my pupils working because
Taip, kad aš norėčiau matyti perspektyvą.
I want to see a perspective that an ability to know what my pupils will do in their life with different disabilities, because my work is useless if my pupils not become independent.
A question to Mr. Džiugelis. If the school does not ensure inclusive education, who will be responsible for that? Are there any sanctions for the principals of schools, or again, parents themselves will have to fight for that? I believe that the responsible body will be the institution that has established the school. So the law will enter into force in 2024. So the school and the administration of the school will be responsible for the introducing of the inclusive education. And what I have in mind is not the local administration that will be responsible for the implementation of the law.
So,
in principle, again, parents will have to fight for their rights. Is that true? Because if parents wanted to take their children to one or another school and the school would reject that child, they would have to fight again. I don't think that this should be the case in 2 years' time. I don't think that parents should undertake legal measures to ensure that their child is enrolled in school. Because they will have letters from that time on. They will have legal instrument to ensure that their rights are protected. I think that this is a very good, I don't think that this is a very good practice to undertake legal measures. But if this is the only way, then I guess we will have to take legal measures against those who do not implement the law. But still, we make every effort to ensure that in 2 years' time, there is no such precedent in the future. We have to ensure that the reform is implemented in the best possible way. We have to ensure that the school, the community, and the children themselves feel comfortable in that environment. This is our future. And we should not be looking back what happened previously. During the Soviet times, there allegedly were no people with disabilities. Now the situation is different. We have a different approach towards human rights and to the rights of the people with disabilities. We have different approach to access to services and so on. We have the video link with the community from Gargždai, and we have a question from them.
Labadiena, Klaipėdos rajono savivaldybės švietimo skyriaus vedėjas Algirdas Petravičius. Gal mano pasisakymas bus susijęs ne tik su mūsų rajonu, bet situacija visoje Lietuvos savivaldybėse. Ne kartą nuskambėjo ir paskutiniai žodžiai iš Seimo nario gerbiamo Justo, savivalda, bet savivaldos galimybės tikrai yra ribotos. Ir tie iššūkiai, kurie laukia savivaldybių, yra labai dideli. Aš nekalbu apie fizinį patalpų pritaikymą, bet kai kurios savivaldybės susiduria su didžiuliu specialistų trūkumu. Ir kai įtraukiu į ugdymą mes turim 32 mėnesius, aš labai abejoju, ar savivaldybės mokyklos bus pasirengusios ir gavus tinkamą finansavimą iš valstybės užtikrinti galimybę visiems vaikams rinktis mokyklą, kurioje būtų teikiamos visos specialistų pagalbos ir paslaugos. Tikrai mes neturėsim Lietuvoje mokyklų, esant poreikiui, kurią galėtų ateiti vaikas, kuriam reikia surdopedagogo ar tikro pedagogo pagalbos. Ar mes galim užtikrinti kokybiškas paslaugas, ypač dabartinėje situacijoje, kai vienam psichologui valstybės lygmeniu yra nustatyta 400 vaikų riba. Neužmirškim, kad toje įstaigoje galbūt dar dirba ir apie 100 pedagogų ar 50 aptarnaujančių personalų darbuotojų. Tai manyčiau, kad didžiausia mes galim padaryti proveržį per likusį laikotarpį kitų jau
is the change of the approach towards the people with disabilities. And I'm very happy that including children into general education is the thing that has been changing. This does not require millions or billions of euros. Member of the same as Mr. Džiugelis has expressed very many useful ideas. I believe that there will be some negative consequences as well, because, well, the same example with vaccination. Majority of us understand that vaccination against COVID is crucial. However, there will be those who will be against vaccination. The same will be with inclusive education. The year 2024 is yet to come, so I would pledge the government and members of the Seimas to provide us additional support and assistance to municipalities, because if this is not the case, municipalities themselves will not be ready to prepare for 2024. We have, when we talk about people with special needs, we should not forget other children. We do have several minutes for the roundup, but I would ask Mr. Džiugelis to respond to the question of funding. Some time ago, I met the European Commissioner who was responsible for the 2032 strategy, and she convinced me that funds have been earmarked in the European Union, by the European Union, and we will have those funds. Well, when it comes to the lack of specialists, psychologists, special education teachers, we should not forget one thing. The pandemic has taught us to work in a little bit different way, which means that a psychologist living in a different location is perfectly able to give consultations to teachers and people living in some other area. So I believe the major thing is the change of our approach and attitude towards inclusive education. Lebedytė Unzėnienė, what's your conclusions and ideas of what to do in order to change the situation? We should talk. We should not be afraid to ask, and I am sure that there will be NGOs who will be able to help to solve the problem. We are the ones who work closely with such families. We stand firmly on the ground. I believe that NGOs have to cooperate with schools, with the administrations of schools. We have to cooperate with municipalities. We have to include schools, municipal staff. So all what it takes is horizontal cooperation among many stakeholder organizations. We have to help each other rather than putting the issues against each other. We have to combine practice and theory. We have many people who do the thinking and talking. We now need the people who do the deed. Mr. Ruškus, I believe that inclusive education is the moral duty of the state. We are not in a position to push the children away from us. If we do this, they will have no chances in the future. Inclusive education is the chance for such children to live an ordinary, quality life. We talked about fears, but we should not be afraid, and we have to ensure that there is a system in place and that the system responds to the standards of the rights of the child. Madam Bartuškienė. Well, just like everywhere, in this debate as well, the truth is somewhere in between. And even the best ideas require funding. Even the best ideas need some economic support. I hope that we will find the balance and we will refrain from diverting to their extremes. Thank you very much. I'd like to remind you that our panelists included Jonas Ruškus, professor at the Vytautas Magnus University, Svaja Venskienė from the Dovilai Main School, Dr. Daiva Bartuškienė from the Vytautas Magnus University, Ramunė Lebedytė Undzienė, project manager at the community of disabled people, Justas Džigelis, member of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania. We talked whether inclusive education is mission possible or impossible. I do hope that this mission is possible. We also had a Gargždai community online. We're grateful for them, and I hope that you will remain for the next sessions of the Human Rights Forum, and the next session will discuss about the same-sex marriages.